Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Friday, February 28th, 2020. And here are our top stories. Asset management and insurance company reaction to the passage of the Secure Act. And we'll discuss retirement income products of the future. And joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Sri Reddy. He's a senior vice president with Principal Financial Group. Sri, welcome to the program.
Jeff, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the show, and you have a very important position creating products, investment products for the retirement industry. But before we get into that and what you see as part of the future, I want to get your reaction around the Secure Act, passed in December of 2019. What's been the response? What's your response to the passage of the Secure Act?
Yeah, so first, Jeff, let me be very clear. Secure didn't pass accidentally. There are many players that provide leadership, including Principal. This is something that I think we've all pushed for several years now, and we applaud Congress and the administration for getting the deal done. Here's why I'm super excited about Secure. The last piece of retirement legislation that was passed that was this important was 2006, so we were due. And when I look for retirement legislation, I'm looking for four things. Is it expanding coverage? So are we going to be able to include more Americans and provide them with a workplace-based retirement savings plan? Now, why is it important? We know when you have access, people take advantage of it and the system works. The second thing I'm looking for is just because you have the plan offered, are there things to drive participation rates higher? And I would argue there are, whether it's increased liquidity, for example, even small provisions saying, hey, if you have adoption needs, you can take money out. Whenever you give people access to their money sooner than they expect, they're much more likely to tie up their money. So participation goes up. The third component I look for is adequacy, right? So are you helping people save enough? And there are absolutely provisions in Secure, whether it's delaying the RMD age, being able to contribute past the age of 70 if you're still working, et cetera, I think absolutely help. And the last component is longevity. So longevity, at least in developed societies, is a moving target. It keeps increasing every decade. Are we giving employees the tools to actually protect themselves against the longevity, knowing that it's something that they probably can't solve for on their own? And with some of the annuity safe harbors and the portability solutions Secure, I think this will have a meaningful impact there as well.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with you. And I think this is an amazing step. And you and Boo and I both lived through the Pension Protection Act that did some great things, but it's hard to believe that it took 14 years or 13 and a half or almost 14 years to get to the point where we had this significant legislation. I want to ask you, if we could, let's talk about retirement income and talk about why this is important. You mentioned the mortality, people living longer, and quite frankly, people do not know what their account balance in a retirement plan actually equates to in terms of lifetime income. I think that is a major issue, to say the least.
Yeah, so I think for your viewership, let's actually back up a step. When ERISA was passed in 1974 and 401k plans were effectively created in 1978, they were never meant to be the end-all solution. They were meant to supplement Social Security and DB plans as a third leg of the stool. Now, clearly, through the 80s and 90s, we saw that more and more employers were stopping or freezing DB plans, and new employers weren't offering them because of the complexity, cost burden, unknown risk, a plenitude of reasons. So 401ks, unfortunately, have become the largest leg of the stool. Now, when you think about that, I think you hit the point dead on. Outside of home equity, 401k balances are the largest pool of savings that most individuals have in this country. And they don't know what that means. They look at a balance, whether it's 50,000, 100,000, or 300,000. They're like, wow, I'm doing really well. How do you know it's enough? And I think because you don't, I think Secure, a really important part of the legislation, is they're going to start requiring lifetime income illustrations on statements. I think when people start saying, oh, my $100,000 will only mean $500 a month of income, I think that will be eye-opening in many, many ways, and hopefully cause the right behaviors of people to save more, maybe delay retirement by a couple of years, and make those kind of choices. The second thing I'll offer up is when you ask people who have Social Security payments, who have annuity payments or pension payments, are you happy in retirement? The overwhelming response is yes. Because when people have a guaranteed stream of income, they have a tendency to spend it. They manage their life to it. When you ask people to draw down their own account, people get very scared. Oftentimes they underspend and they underconsume, which is not the right behavior you're trying to drive in retirement, because this is something that you worked your entire life for. You might as well take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I want to just hone in a little bit on the lifetime income disclosures. And I know, we just saw the passage in late December. What has to happen from a product development standpoint? And maybe this is not necessarily your area, but I would imagine that there's regulatory guidance that's needed. There's sample, you and I both lived through the fee disclosure rules, and part of the fee disclosure was a disclosure statement. That took a lot of time to get the pertinent details settled. I would imagine something similar would have to happen for these lifetime income disclosures as well.
I'm feeling a little bit better on the lifetime income disclosure because I think there's at least a commonality of definition, a commonality of illustration. But the reality is there's lots of different record keepers in the country who provide retirement services. This is technology and capability that they each have to build out. And you want to make sure it's meaningful. And the geography that's presented on is also going to get mind share, right? Because truth be told, putting on statements is an important first step. But you and I know the reality, most participants don't even open up their statements. That's not something people do when you have 401k. That's the last thing on your mind. So how do you make sure you get to be more front of mind for them?
Yeah, I think you're right on that. And I think that what I love hearing from you, and I've seen this from the industry, is that there is sharing of information. It's not just the Shri Reddy and the principal way of doing things, right? You have industry associations, you talk among yourselves, you come up with a common standard by which information can be displayed uniformly. That's typically how it works within the industry.
No, you're right. Listen, we're all competitors and we all want to win. But at the end of the day, we want Americans to win. And the more people that are educated and they're making the right decisions, the better off we're going to be in our society. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Shri, I want to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Shri about retirement incomes, kind of focus in on that. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? They are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. We're talking to Shri Reddy. He's the Senior Vice President with Principal Financial Group. Shri, thanks so much for sticking around this morning.
My pleasure, Jeff.
So we had a great conversation about your reaction, the industry's reaction to Secure, and we also talked about lifetime income. Now I want to talk about product development. This is an area of expertise of yours and the team at Principal. So I want to talk about how you're thinking about retirement income products and the creation, because it's not something that you just whip up in a back room in 30 seconds, right? This is a long timeline in order to create a product.
Well, it is, and we take the creation of our solutions very seriously because for over 140 years, we've been fulfilling promises, right? These are long tail commitments, and we want to make sure we're thoughtful about what we promise, we're thoughtful about the risk management around it, and we can actually deliver what was committed. There's a couple of different dimensions you need to be thinking about when you think about lifetime income solutions as it pertains to 401k plans. The first dimension, Jeff, is are you okay with best efforts or do you need guaranteed? Right? Best efforts refers to things like systematic withdrawal programs, managed payout funds. It could be any such investment related vehicle that for the most part you should be okay, but there's no guarantee to back it. Now, and what I'll tell you is my personal bias is best efforts are good if you have a ton of money, but for the vast majority of Americans who can't take on those kind of risks, they're probably going to be leaning towards a guaranteed product. So when you talk about guaranteed product in our world, there's a few different ways you can get there. What part of the risk do you want to guarantee? Do you want to guarantee the tail risk or do you want to guarantee the whole journey? Do you want to guarantee full liquidity and take lesser income? Or are you willing to give up control, revocability in return for greater income? Is it for your own lifetime? Is it for a spousal lifetime? And oh, by the way, here's an interesting wrinkle a lot of people are probably thinking about. Until Secure passed, you could easily do an example of an annuity being joint with 20 period certain in life. Things like that don't work anymore because Secure prevents stretch IRAs. So we need to be cognizant to make sure that products and solutions we're developing not only make sense or are in compliance with regulation, but also help participants make the most of the regulations they have.
Shri, communication and education seems like a very important component to this, and this may not necessarily be your particular area of expertise as you're designing programs, or maybe it is, but I got to believe that that's a significant aspect of this, is you're creating these products, and you just rattled off some very important terms. Many people watching this may not necessarily understand some of these concepts. That means to me that there's an educational component to this.
No question, Jeff. And I think as an industry, we need to reframe and reorient ourselves, right? I mean, when you look at some of the technology we interface with today, whether it's our mobile phones, tablets, iPads, and the like, these things are inexplicably complicated. I mean, if you were to open up the guts of most cell phones, I don't think anyone can tell you what it is, but they intuitively know how to use them. And I think in our world, we need to figure out how to create experiences that let people fully understand and immerse themselves in the solution without getting caught up in necessarily the details that they don't want to know, right? We want to make it available. Transparency is key to me. Candor is key to me. But simplicity, elegance, ease of use is also very, very important.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And, you know, there are a lot of financial professionals out there, whether they're investment advisors working directly with the plan sponsor, the employer, or those working directly with the individual participant. I also have to think that due diligence and benchmarking, understanding not just the products from the principal, but also products from other entities as well, need to be understood and vetted. And you mentioned transparency. I think that's part of that.
So I agree with you. I think one of the things that we need to help both advisors, consultants, and plan sponsors understand is when you buy guarantees and you buy protection, by definition, they're not the same thing as investment products. So comparing the two would almost be comparing fruits and pastries. I mean, it's not even the same realm of things. So and part of why that's important is people unfortunately have a tendency to focus only on costs, not thinking about the value they're actually receiving. And they give up a ton of value in the absence of further analysis. And I think without raising the awareness, you might have some bad decisions or choices being made.
Yeah, it's so myopic to me, and you know, I would say for others in the industry, when people just focus on the 1 year return or the short-term return, right? And then they're also looking at, or the crediting rate or whatever, and they look at the fees, right? But there is something of value which is a little bit harder to measure. And how much is your security? How much is your financial security, your ability to go to sleep at night, to think about that you're going to have an income, that your spouse is going to have an income, that your children are going to have something in retirement? That's worth something that I don't know if you can really express that in fees or return.
Well, the way I explain, Jeff, I use a simple analogy and story I've been using for years, right? When you look at infrastructure around the planet, there's guardrails on roads because people don't want to hit the guardrail, right? They're there because they want to make sure that you feel protected and safe to help you get across the bridge of the road, get you to where you're going with a level of peace of mind. So absolutely agree with you. There is value in it. It's making sure people understand what that is.
And then lastly, Sri, I mean, an important part of any product creation is regulatory, right? And what's very different about, for example, just creating a straight investment product is you have to go through the Securities and Exchange Commission, you have to be registered, all those kind of things. In the insurance, when you have an insurance product, you actually have to be registered at the at the state level, right? So that's not just getting compliance and regulatory approval at the federal level. It is getting it at the state of in Iowa or in Maryland, et cetera.
You're right. I mean, that is another complexity because state regulators want to make sure their state citizens are protected. Because as we've talked about, these are long-term promises. So we've got, in addition to all the investment regulators, we've got potentially FINRA oversight. We also have the 50 states plus Puerto Rico and DC. But you know what, Jeff? I actually think all of these regimes are working for the same outcome, which is making sure people live their best lives and the promises that they were made are kept. And I'm supportive of any regulation that's consistent, that levels the playing field for all of us, and it's clear about what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I would agree. I just, in terms of bringing that up, I was thinking about, the product development cycle. That is additive. You got to get these reviewed by insurance commissions and whatnot and these other entities. But I would agree wholeheartedly that it seems like everyone's kind of in lockstep, whether it's the SEC, the insurance commissioners, and all the other entities, to make sure that these things get created, or else why would we have the legislation passed? Because these people are also involved at some level, at least in the discussions of creation of legislation, so they know it's coming. Well, Sri, I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate you joining us, and look forward to hearing your perspective in the future.
Jeff, thanks for having me on, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. And tomorrow, we're back again with BRN Weekly, our retrospective show where we look back at the best segments and interviews for the week. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving and don't forget, roll with the changes.